Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. El Malpais National Monument is a place where fire and time have come together to create a landscape like no other. El Malpais is a living classroom for science where the forces of volcanism are preserved in astonishing detail. And now, let's meet our rock star rangers, Shannon and Sarah. Ranger Shannon, let's start with you. Tell us about your journey here to El Malpais.
Yeah, I used to be a high school history teacher in North Carolina, and then I got a job as an education specialist for Voyageurs National Park, and that was a summer position, and this actually was the first job that I applied to. Somebody sent it to me and said, I think you'd be really good at that. So I just went ahead and applied, and sure enough, I got it. So after I finished at Voyageurs, I came down here to do pretty much the same job. I work with kids in schools, and I have the best job in the world because I get to bring kids here to the park.
I love it. So Sarah, I bet yours a little bit similar in your journey. You've probably been to other parks. So tell us about your journey here.
I have been. So I actually got my job in the Park Service because I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Cameroon. So I was a middle school science teacher in Cameroon for 2 years. And I used that to get a job with the government. So my first park was Homestead National Historical Park in Nebraska. And then I went to Chickasaw National Recreation Area in Oklahoma. And then I came here to El Malpais.
And fate has brought you two together. So we're really excited for you to share about this place. First of all, let's talk about the name. Where did the name Malpais come from?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny name, but it's from Spanish. So because this lava is really rough and rugged, when the Spanish conquistadors got here, they got to the lava and they said, ooh, that is a bad land. And El Malpais means bad country or bad land.
Oh, I love that. So just really translated from Spanish into English, bad land.
Uh-huh.
And this place is pretty special too. It's on some land, some ancestral land. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this area where we are today, this is the ancestral homeland of a number of pueblos in New Mexico. So we have Pueblo of Zuni, Pueblo of Acoma, Pueblo of Laguna, and then we also have the Dine or the Navajo Nation here as well.
So very sacred land, and we're very happy to be here today to share the stories here. So Ranger Shannon, you talked about lava at the very beginning of this. So does that mean we're standing on volcanic ground?
Absolutely. Below us is lava. Behind us is lava. El Malpais is protecting 5 major lava flows, but there's also more lava flows outside of the park boundary as well. We have 8 to 10 volcanic vents just right here within the park.
Well, while you were talking, I reached down and picked what I thought was a very small rock, but it is extremely heavy. So what am I holding here?
You are holding basaltic lava. So this is lava that oozed out of a really small volcano. Usually when we think of volcanoes, we think of a pointy mountain. When it erupts, it goes psh, 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 psh. That's not the case here. These are really low to the ground volcanoes. So when that volcano is going to erupt, it oozes all this sticky hot lava like glue or syrup. And that's what creates the lava flows that we have.
So when did this start?
Well, there's been volcanic eruptions happening all over New Mexico for a really long time. But our lava is really young geologically. Some of our lava is 60,000 years old, and some of our lava is about 3,000 to 4,000 years old, which for us seems like a really long time, but in actuality, it's kind of like a little baby compared to a lot of other rocks.
So we know that there's a lot of wildlife around here that is surviving in this volcanic ecosystem. So what type of wildlife can we find here?
Well, for vegetation, we are in a pinyon juniper area. So a lot of our trees are going to be pinyons and junipers. We might also have some ponderosa pines. We have a variety of grasses. We have little birds that like to live in the trees and they're flying around eating all the little pinyon nuts. We have a lot of lizards here in the desert. So you might find all different kinds of lizards and reptiles like rattlesnakes as well.
Now, do the rattlesnakes scare you, or have you been here long enough where you're okay with them?
If I was close to a rattlesnake, I would be afraid. Ranger Sarah is not at all afraid of rattlesnakes.
Well, tell us about that. So you have a love for them?
I do. I love all reptiles, including rattlesnakes. And I have stumbled across a few. Luckily, they did their job and they rattled at me and they gave me a warning. And I was like, well, okay, I'll step away from you because I accidentally got too close and I wasn't watching where I was going.
So almost a healthy respect of them. You respect them, you like them, but you know where to take your distance.
Exactly. And I know that they are probably more scared of me than I am of them. So they're just trying to mind their business and I'll mind mine and we'll be okay.
So we're here in November, which is sort of chilly. Are we going to find them out today?
Probably not right now with how chilly the air temperature is, but when you get a warm sunny day in the winter, sometimes they might come out to get a drink of water or to just sunbathe for a little bit. But for the most part, we're not going to see them very active in the winter.
Now you talked about those little birds. What are those little birds called that get those little nuts out of the pinions?
Those are called pinion jays, and Sarah can tell us about those.
Yeah, so something really cool about pinion jays is they actually co-evolved with the pinyon pines. So they eat the seeds, the nuts, for food, and then they cache them. That means they store them away for the winter when there's less food available. And by doing that, they actually help spread the seeds of the tree so the tree can grow. So that's seed dispersal happening. And so they get food, but then the tree gets dispersed. So we have a mutualistic relationship going on here between the pinyon jay and the pinyon pine tree.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I like being able to help each other, and that's what
Exactly.
they do.
Mm-hmm.
We are in what type of ecosystem here?
We are in a desert grassland area.
Okay, and which means we get what kind of weather in the summer?
In this late summer, we have monsoon season here, so we get a lot of rains.
A lot of rain.
Yeah, big thunderstorms.
Okay, and then what about in the winter?
In the winter, we actually do get quite a bit of snow. So the snow will stick around for a lot of the winter. And then in the spring, it actually gets really windy here in the spring, but that snow will start to melt.
Well, I noticed that as I'm looking around, there looks like there's some places that have been recently burned. Tell us about that area we're in, and then we're going to talk to Ranger Shannon about how she helps with that.
Yeah, so the area we're standing in right now, we actually burned a little over a year ago. And after the monsoon rains came, we got some nice vegetation regrowth after the fire. So why we do prescribed fires is to help get rid of extra fuel loads. So that way, if there is a wildfire, there isn't as much fuel. So a lower temperature, lower intensity fire is going to be beneficial for this ecosystem, and we're going to help prevent really large damaging hot fires.
So we call them prescribed because we actually plan for these. Now, Ranger Shannon, you told me something that's really exciting. You are part of that fire team. Tell us how you got to be part of that, and I think you have some equipment here today.
I do, yes. So I got involved with fire right out of college. I worked with the AmeriCorps, and I worked with Virginia State Parks, and part of that was prescribed fire. We do a lot of fire in Virginia, and so that's where I got what we call a red card. You have to take a certain amount of classes, and you have to pass a fitness test, and then you get your red card. So when I came to the Park Service, I already had the red card because it doesn't expire. Your fitness test you have to redo. And that was something I knew I wanted to be a part of again. I missed doing fire. I really enjoyed it. So when I got here, especially being in the Southwest, where fire is a major concern, they were able to allow me to help out with their fire. So I've done both prescribed burns and wildfires here.
So I see that you're holding a hat, which is different than your flat hat. Tell me why it's hard.
Yeah, this is my helmet. Sometimes things fall. If a tree is on fire or something, it's very easy for branches and other things. We have a lot of chainsaws going during fire, so you have to have a helmet at all times. It's one of the first things that we're going to put on when we get to a fire.
I'm going to hold that, and tell me what else you have down there.
Yeah, we call these our yellows, obviously, because it's yellow, but this is our fire shirt. Doesn't matter what the weather is, this shirt must be on top. If it's cold and you want to put on a jacket, you still have to put this shirt on top. It's made out of a special material called Nomex. And so Nomex is more fire resistant. If you catch on fire, it's not going to stop you, but it's going to slow it down. It's kind of similar to what you would see a firefighter in a city wearing. But obviously our shirts, they're a lot looser than a regular firefighter in a city because we're out in the wilderness. We're hiking for a really long time. We could be wearing our gear and hiking around for 10 hours, 12 hours a day. Sometimes we even sleep in this.
So I see the blue hat here, and I haven't taken the test yet, but I'm just going to put it on. And you're right, it fits very snug, which makes a lot of sense. When I put it on, though, this fell out. Tell me why I would need a headlamp.
Yeah, with wildfire, there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't know how long you're going to be out there. It could be 2 o'clock in the morning or later. Sometimes we're out all night. So you always have to have a headlamp with you just in case, especially if you're on terrain like this, because it's really rocky. You want to be able to see where you're going so you don't get hurt and cause more issues.
Let me hold the shirt. And is there anything else you want to show us?
Yeah, I have with me, it looks like a regular backpack here. So this is my line bag. This is what we bring out with us on wildfires. It's where we carry all of our equipment. On the bottom is the most important piece of our line bag, which is our fire shelter. And that is kind of like a fitted sheet, almost out of an aluminum foil type of material. And that's going to keep us safe in the event of an emergency. We dig a little hole and we cover ourselves with a fire shelter. So you can't go anywhere near a wildfire without having one of these. This is also where we're going to carry our water and our snacks and sunscreen, anything we might need, because again, we could be out there for over 12 hours. So anything you might need has to be in here. But these things do get really heavy. Our test is 45 pounds to be able to walk with that. My bag usually is a little bit more because I carry a lot of water with me.
So are there other women on this team with you?
Here at Malpais, as of right now, I am the only female. For some other fires I've been to, there's been about 1 to 2 females per crew.
And that's growing because I read recently in Alaska, they were training all women fire crews. So yay women, way to do those jobs.
Yeah, it's important to have women out here.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you back your shirt. So Sarah, I'm going to hold on to this headlamp because I think this is going to make a connection to something else that we find here. So we've talked about the lava rock. We've talked about the pinyon pine, the jay that picks out the nuts. We talked about keeping this area safe through prescribed burns so we don't have a lot of fuel. But we also have another ecosystem, if you will, to protect. So tell us what we're seeing behind us right now and make sure I don't step off into it.
Okay, yeah, behind us we're seeing a trench here, and this is from a collapsed lava tube. So we have lava tubes here in our lava flows, and where they don't collapse, they form caves. So we have over 450 caves in our park, and these caves are all volcanically formed. We don't have any limestone caves like you might have seen at other national park sites. So these are a little bit different, all volcanic. So where they collapse, we have the trench. Where they don't collapse, we have cave ecosystems. And then we might have a transition area in between those two habitats.
Well, tell us, this, as we say, is a little bit different than what we've seen at Carlsbad or at Mammoth Cave or even Jewel Cave. I noticed that there's a lot of rocks here. In fact, people behind us are trying to climb down now, which is making me nervous. But when you come and visit these caves and you climb down these lava rocks, what are we going to find inside?
Yeah, so our caves here are really special. We actually have, even though we're in kind of an arid environment, we have some skylights, or we have, that's a hole in the top of the cave where the light's coming in. We have some mosses, over like 95 species of mosses grow here, ferns. Some of these plants we only see really far north and down here, so we call them glacial remnants. So they're actually kind of rare species that we find in these caves.
Are we going to find rattlesnakes in there?
Not so much. A rattlesnake might go in by a cave entrance to catch a rat, but there's not a lot of great snake habitat in there. And if anyone has learned about reptiles before, we know they like to sunbathe. They need that warmth. So these caves are going to be too cold for most reptiles to live in.
What else will we find inside there?
Yeah, so inside, when you have mosses and ferns, and you have the bats coming in, and the bats actually produce something called guano.
Guano?
Yeah.
What is that?
That is bat poop. And
okay,
so that,
well, we all poop, so we
poop.
got that.
And it's really important because the bats are actually bringing nutrients, bringing nitrogen into the cave that wouldn't otherwise be there. So their poop can be fed on by little bacteria, and then we kind of start to go up the food chain. We have little cave crickets, little spiders, other types of invertebrates that are going to live in the cave and feed off of that guano-based ecosystem.
Well, the one that we're standing in front of now, and I think they made it down to the bottom, which one is this? Which cave is this?
Yeah, so we call this one right behind us, we call it Junction Bridge Cave. So it's there's not much of a cave area, there's just a little bit of darkness. So this one people can go in only because it doesn't have any sensitive resources in it that we're very worried about. Just down the trench over here, there is a cave called Junction Cave that has a big gate over it. And so that's one that we are protecting the hibernating bats in there. It is one of the largest hibernaculums in our park.
Now, what's a hibernaculum?
So a hibernaculum is an area where an animal is going to hibernate. In this case, lots of little bats.
What type of bats will we find here?
That's an excellent question. So we have 14 species of bats that live in our monument. So you won't find all 14 in one cave. They're going to have different preferences as far as temperature and size, and they tend to cluster with their own species and not mix so much. So we have things like Townsend's big-eared bat, we have Mexican free-tailed bats, we have little Myotis bats. So a lot of different variety when it comes to bats.
Are you as enamored with bats as you are snakes?
I still have a soft spot for snakes, but I love bats too. I think they're both misunderstood animals that people have perhaps irrational fears about.
Well, we have a lot of stories about bats and movies about bats, so we're always scared of things that we don't understand. So understanding this is very important. Now, we know that bats across the country are faced with a disease. Can you talk about that disease?
Yeah, white nose syndrome. So white nose syndrome comes from a fungus, and that fungus can get on the bats while they're hibernating, and it wakes them up too early. When they wake up, they can't find any food, especially if they're used to eating bugs. In the winter, we don't have bugs here. So it kind of disrupts their whole system. And then because they can't find food and they're really weak because they should be hibernating, then they'll just die.
So who is bringing this fungus?
People.
I noticed that when we came into this area, there was a boot washing station that wasn't being utilized now. Is that because you are not letting people in most of the caves?
Yeah, so right now the caves in this particular area where we are not open to the public, with the exception of this small tube behind us that doesn't have any bats in it. So again, we're trying to protect the bats not only from the white nose fungus being introduced on someone's shoes or caving gear or clothing, but we also want to not disturb them while they're roosting because they can be really sensitive just to us entering the cave and being near them while they're trying to sleep.
Ranger Shannon, you told us something interesting that as of right now, we don't have this white nose syndrome here. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've got some bats that have been tested and they're positive, but they don't seem to be infected with it. So right now our steps are preventative. We want to keep our bats healthy here.
And you're doing that by several different things, closing off the caves, making sure if people are going to go in them in a later time that they have an area to wash. Now, I have been to Mammoth multiple times in the last 5 years. So I would be one of those people that you probably would ask, are those the same clothes you wore in the cave? Are those the same boots that you had on? If that is true, I could still probably go in, but I would have to do some decontamination protocols for that. What else do we want to protect in there? I heard that when you touch cave walls, you can disrupt the ecosystem. Things are very fragile there. Is that true?
Yeah, so these caves generally, people have not been in them very often. And so we get some people coming in, they can step on those really sensitive mosses and plants. If they touch cave minerals, that can disrupt them. The oils can stop the minerals from growing. We also have some archaeological resources in some of our caves, like some animal bones that people took animals in there to refrigerate the meat for food. So all kinds of really cool things in caves here, and you might not recognize them when you're in there. So in order to protect them, we have to make sure people know what to look for and know what areas are safe to walk on and which ones aren't.
Well, that's interesting to know that people did use these caves for certain things. Are there any stories here you can tell?
Yeah, there's a really great story, a Navajo story, about the hero twins, and they had slayed a monster. And today, the foot of that monster is Mount Taylor, which is outside of Grants. It's a really big stratovolcano, but the blood of that monster is these lava flows that we're on right now.
So a legend, if you will, a story. And then you talked about the Pueblo.
Yeah.
So are they still using this place? Because I'm going to tell you, this is very rough terrain for me. I mean, just
Yeah.
walking over here, there's so many rocks, and as you said, they're extremely sharp. Who else has navigated this place, and do they still use it today?
Absolutely. All the Pueblos, all the people live around us and they live here today and they still use this land and they come and visit. Now, as Shannon mentioned earlier, the Spanish, we call this area Malpais because the Badlands, because it was difficult to cross. But ancestral Pueblans actually have numerous footpaths across the lava flows where they were trading with each other and trading with the next door Pueblos. So they made use of this land. They made use of resources like the pinon nuts that grow here. Their ancestors definitely made use of the lava tube caves. We actually do have some lava tubes that have ice in them. Even some have permanent ice year round. And we have found through scientific research that people were actually going in the caves, melting the ice with a little torch in times of drought. So in the past, people have known to go into the caves as a source for water when they can't find any water on the surface.
So ice caves, that sounds really exciting. Have you ever been in an ice cave before?
I have. Yes, we do have a cave here called Giant Ice, and that one is open to the public. You just have to get a permit.
So it seems like there are a lot of things to protect here. So I think we have found our challenge. So kids, we're going to be looking at UN Global Goal number 15, which is life on land. We've learned today that in this place, in this Spanish named Badlands, that we have these caves. And in the caves, we have a fragile ecosystem. We want to protect the walls. We want to protect the ice, the water, the bats, the cave crickets, the rats, the snakes, everything here. So how can we do that? What things could you put in place to help others decide to be good stewards of the places that we live in? So we want you to come up with some ideas, whether it's some protective devices, whether it's new types of boots or boot washers, or equipment that you use to get down the rocks. And then protecting this fragile ecosystem, we want you to take that same idea back to your own communities. What places do you see around you that need your protection? You're going to share this with the parks. You're going to see some information running on the screen right now where you can share your information. I will share it immediately with Ranger Sarah and Ranger Shannon, and they'll share it with their team because we know sometimes the best ideas come from you. Shannon, some advice for kids that want your job someday. Look right in that middle camera.
Yeah, I would say just study what you love. There's a place for everybody in the National Park Service. You don't just have to be a scientist. You can be somebody that's interested in history. There's a place for artists, people that make music or paint. Anything that you're passionate about, I would say follow that, and then there's a place for you here.
Sarah, anything to add to that?
I think Shannon summed it up really nicely. Study whatever interests you, follow your passion, and there's a job for you in the National Park Service.
I agree. And we want you guys to put your interest, your passion to work here and possibly in the National Park Service. So thank you so much for joining us today at El Malpais. Let's say that together. El Malpais National Monument in New Mexico. On behalf of Ranger Sarah and Ranger Shannon and myself, we're out of here. Thanks so much, guys.